We're going to hear stories of old Boca Grande featuring David Futch today. We're proudly sponsored by Hazeltine Nurseries. At this time, we're very happy to welcome Randy Wayne White. Randy and David have been friends 40 years, dating back to Randy's days as a fishing guide out of Tarpon Bay Marina on Sanibel. Randy is the author of 26 Doc Ford novels, many of them set on Captiva and Sanibel. Salt River is his most recent book, which was preceded by Caribbean Rim and Mangrove Lightning. Randy lives on Sanibel Island and spends much of his free time windsurfing, playing baseball, and hanging out at Doc Ford's Rum Bar and Grill, a restaurant franchise themed after his popular series. It's time for you to start, Randy. Welcome.
Well, Betsy, thank you for that generous introduction. I do have a correction to make. David Futch and Mark Futch, we weren't friends. They didn't like me at all back in those years. and I would run my Shamrock boat up to Boca Grande Pass with clients when I was a fishing guide. And the Boca Grande guides, now, by golly, they're great at what they do. They're brilliant fisher people, but they can be a little testy, and they didn't like outsiders. But their complaint in those years, and David will back me up on this, is that they didn't want fishermen up there with outboard motors. Well, I ran a Shamrock, so I had a true inboard, so they couldn't get mad at me about that. And over the years, we gradually became not just friends, but close friends and confidants. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to talk about David Futch, whom I first met in the early 1980s. We were reminiscing a bit ago. And I remember when David got married, I took he and his wife out of my boat and I dropped them off at a little island at the mouth of the Caloosahatchee we called Picnic Island. And more than occasionally, I had to avert my eyes. And that is true. David is, when I met him, he was a fishing guide and a journalist. We had that in common. His father had been a state patrolman, so had my father. So we had much in common. And I've watched David's career over the years. A gifted journalist. He was the editor of the newspaper at the University of Florida. That's a big deal, by the way. Worked at the News Press. One of the founders of the newspaper there in Boca Grande. And the Futch family, think of the Darnas, the Wheelers, Dumplin Wheeler, Billy Wheeler, the Hamiltons, valuable local oral history. That unique Florida voice, if anyone can capture it, it is David Futch. It is his birthright. David was, as a native Floridian, his family came to Boca Grande in the 1880s. So I much look forward to reading David's book, and from what I have read, it's just terrific. And I'm going to turn it now over to David and you folks, as David and everyone knows, I have a book due tomorrow, and that's the truth. I'm on deadline. So I'm not going to be able to stay for the entire program, but I am honored to introduce Captain David Futch, and I look forward to hearing what he has to say. Thank you.
Randy, I can't thank you enough for that. As Randy said, we met in 1982. I was covering Lee County Commission for the Fort Myers News Press. Randy had been a journalist there a few years before, but he was a fishing guide at Tarpon Bay and, in Sanibel. And he had this charity benefit. So we went out there, and from what I recall, and I'm not going to get into the details, the benefit had a kayak race and an abundance of adult beverages. And I'll leave it at that.
Probably true.
And yeah, Randy's been a great friend for years, and I just love the guy. And if you've never read any of his books, you should. They're page turners, absolute page turners. I want to start by saying that, it's really heartening to see so many people here who are interested in Boca Grande history. It is a fascinating one. I was fascinated by the things that I found out that I didn't know. And I see, of course, a lot of old friends, and I'm glad to see a lot of new friends. I want to thank Betsy for hosting today. Betsy Fugate Joiner, one of my oldest and dear friends. And I also want to thank the Boca Grande Historical Society for putting on this event. I think it's important. History is important. It's where we know we come from and what we need to do later, if you will. Take history as a lesson. And in particular, I want to thank Pat Eagles and Pam Heilman and Karen Grace for all their help on putting this together. Now, to get started, I'm going to be reading the introduction to my book, The Official, Unofficial History of Boca Grande. And then I want to read parts of two chapters, one on tarpon fishing and the other on my grandfather, Dan Futch, the rum smuggler. This picture, this is going to be the cover of my book. And this picture hung behind the bar at the Pink Elephant, the old Pink Elephant, God, when I was there bartending in the 1970s. And I loved it so much. And it explains a lot about why people are in Boca Grande. They've got fishing, and if you look at the subscript, what the hell are we drinking anyway? And look at these critters they're pulling in, kind of like Boca Grande Pass. So, Betsy, maybe you could tell them a little bit about this picture. You know more about it than I do.
I think one of the fun things about this picture is the story that my dad, Delmar, told about it. It did hang behind the Pink Elephant bar for as long as I can remember, too. And I asked my brother, and we both kind of believe it probably showed up in the 50s. The Pink Elephant was actually started building in 1947 and opened in 49. Probably late 50s, early 60s maybe. But a friend of my parents, Frank Foster from Pennsylvania, who worked for the Corning family, for the Corning Glass Company, loved to come. They came to Gasparilla Inn, and they were big shellers. And from what I remember about her, they were also big drinkers. There was a lot of partying, a lot of things happening at that nice big copper bar at Pink Elephant. But it was a friend of Frank's, what we can assume, that sketched that out, assumingly probably on cocktail napkins, not sure. But I'm sure it was after he was listening to stories from some of the Futch brothers and some of the others that were telling stories at the bar after they had a few of those añejo and cokes. But palinka is Portuguese, means trouble. And that just kind of says a lot of word about what was happening at the time. And fortunately, I have that painting, and I'm very excited to share it with David for his book.
Thank you so much, Betsy. And for those of you who don't know, Betsy Fugate Joiner's father, Delmar Fugate, he built the old Pink Elephant. So we have him to thank for that. And there it is. There's the old Pink.
This is original painting by Patty Middleton of what the Pink Elephant looked like before the last edition that my dad had put on, where those umbrellas are that it eventually became glassed in and closed in. But that's the way it was. It was really pink. It has the same architecture style as the Johann Fuss Library. And downstairs was a dining room, upstairs was a bar, package store.
Oh, there you go.
That's a great picture. That's inside the bar. The bar was all Pecky cypress. And that's my dad and mother front and center. And Bar Stover somewhere probably behind there pouring the drinks. That actually was a character who came into Boca Grande at some point in the late 80s, I think, who did a lot of characters. And that also is at my house. I have a lot of pink elephants at my house.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see them. That's my dad, Delmar, assuming in his early 30s, at the guide dock there in the bayou with two of his catches. And if you can see, look at that heavy lead at the top of the rod.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just kind of wondering how in the world he was able to stand there with just his toes on the dock in his white bucks. And this picture of my grandfather, Jerome Fugate Sr. with Tarpon. And in the background, that's the guide docks. And the background, that's where the Pink Elephant was built later days. So you're looking at where the Pink Elephant is and probably the back where the golf Gasparilla Golf Course. It's a typical fishing day. There's not fishermen. There's a lot of fisherwomen that fish for tarpon. Look at that cigarette hanging out there. She's pretty concentrating on that tarpon and that cigarette.
Those are my, my great uncles. On the left is Hugh, or we called him Duke, and then next to him is Shug Futch, Rayford, Sugar Boy, or everybody called him Shug. And then there's Dwayne, what a cat he was, and young Rayford Jr. on the right. Okay, everybody ready?
We're ready to hear the story.
The first thing I'm going to read today is my introduction to the official, unofficial history of Boca Grande. Some folks might say this book about Boca Grande is revisionist history, whoppers, nothing but fish stories. Others might say the truth is there somewhere if you squint your eyes. A third group of believers swear that's the gospel. My granddaddy told me that story the same way. Each side can be right, and so can I. That's because this is my take based on many sources, some on target, some with nothing in the quiver. This is what I know about Gasparilla Island, beginning with the ruthless Calusa who beheaded their enemies, to the conquistadors who wiped them out, to the Crown and Shields who imported kindness when they stepped off their private train car. I expect my cousin, Captain Dumplin Wheeler, will say, that ain't how it happened. That's because that's what Dumplin says whenever anyone tells a story about old Boca Grande. Then in the next sentence, Dumplin will recite pretty much the same story, except that, according to Dumplin, the tarpon's bigger, the stakes are higher, and Dumplin's heroism, of course, more laudable. History is a matter of perspective, and this is mine. My telling about how things used to be on Boca Grande before the world discovered this island of the mind, as artist Jack Barndollar called Gasparilla. This is my love letter to Boca Grande and old Florida. Serious to comedic describes my approach to these whispers and folktales. Pirates plundered merchant ships offshore in the 1820s. At the same time, fishing ranchos on Gasparilla, Uzepa, and Cayo Costa Islands exported hundreds of thousands of pounds of salted fish to Cuba every year. My family, the Fishin' Futches, came ashore in the 1880s to work at the ranchos. A dozen years later, my great-grandfather, Frank Futch, and his sons figured out how to catch tarpon on a rod and reel and started the guide fishing industry on the Gulf Coast. Gasparilla Island rum smugglers, like my grandfather Dan, thumbed their noses at the law in the 1920s. A half-century later, sons of sailors carried on Boca Grande's smuggling tradition by importing tons of marijuana through Boca Grande Pass. Rich or poor, longtime natives embraced the island's reputation as a shelter for runaways in search of an escape at the end of the line. Some anecdotes are culled from historical pieces written for Becky Patterson's Pirate Coast magazine. Others originated with my time as editor of the Gasparilla Gazette and Boca Beacon. Many more originate with conversations and interviews I've done with islanders who told me about the goodie before it was gone. Boca Grande Historical Society records and interviews with islanders confirm much of the island's past. Then there are the stories based on yarns passed down through 7 generations. Not long after Florida became a state in 1845, my great-great-great-grandfather, John Roberts of Green Turtle Cay, Bahamas, landed in Key West and offered his skills as a ship's caulker. My great-grandfather, Frank Futch, and his wife, the former Sarah Melissa Slaughter, sailed to Gasparilla Island in 1883 where he fished for Pekin's Ranch at the north end. Long before the Futches, the Calusa Indians ruled Southwest Florida for 1,500 years and made Charlotte Harbor their breadbasket. Gargantuan people, Calusa men measured more than 6 feet tall, some approaching 7. They feasted on oysters and sacrificed their enemies, sticking severed heads on poles outside their lodges and at spots along the boundaries of Calusa land. But the Calusa were no match for Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto and his brutal army. De Soto landed on Gasparilla and neighboring islands in the 1500s, wiping out the Calusa with lead shot and disease. As Spain's power ebbed and conquistadors disappeared, a pirate named Jose Gaspar and his buccaneers ruled Charlotte Harbor. As legend goes, Gasparilla Island's namesake kept women such as Spanish Princess Josefa on Uzapa Island, while he plundered merchant ships in the Gulf of Mexico. In 1821, American naval ships disguised as commercial vessels lured in Gaspar, then sank his sloop as Gaspar lashed himself to the anchor and went over the side. It's a hell of a legend, and my family likes thinking it's true. Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't matter. A Jose Gaspar story never fails to entertain. And that's what you're going to get. Intriguing stories about buccaneers and rum smugglers, marijuana kingpins who were 20th century pirates, tarpon fishermen and fisherwomen, and the scions of industry who turned Boca Grande into their winter playground. Even Goldfinger has a part to play. As an added attraction, an island recipe at the end of each chapter provides a thread of connection to that chapter. I hope this collection of fish tales brings smiles to longtime islanders who remember taking the ferry to get here. If you're new to Boca Grande, this is what happened on this spit of sand before and after a bridge to the mainland invited the world. The hope is that after reading these stories, natives and newbies alike will think, I'll be darned, I didn't know that. I love Boca Grande. It's in my heart and blood. For more than a century, there were so many Futches on Boca Grande that the locals like to say, shake a tree and a Futch will fall out. Most of those fallen Futches would get up, dust themselves off, and tell you a story, like I'm going to do right now. What? The next piece I'm going to read is, it's called A Pirate in the Straits. It's about my grandfather, Dan, running rum from Cuba to Key West back to Boca Grande. Prohibition never stops Dan Futch from doing what he has to do to put food on the table. The law means nothing to him, mostly because there isn't much law around when Futch sets out on treacherous trips across the Florida Straits to smuggle Cuban rum or Canadian whiskey. Champagne is a popular item, whatever Futch could trade for American cigarettes. Every summer from 1924 to 1932, my grandfather makes a familiar run to Cardenas, Cuba. On one trip, life and death are at play. But the prospect of trouble doesn't faze Futch because he's been in plenty of scrapes in his short 26 years. As in previous trips, Futch hires the same man in Cardenas to watch his boat and help him load it with rum bound for Boca Grande. As the man hands down case after case from the dock, Futch notices his helper eyeing the new outboard motor, clipped to the stern in case his inboard engine fails, like it did on the trip before. As Futch prepares to depart, he grabs a pipe wrench at his feet, just in case his suspicions are confirmed. As the helper tosses the last line onto the boat, he tries to snatch the new outboard motor hanging off the stern of Futch's 26-foot open boat, Sweeney. Futch strikes the would-be thief in the head with the wrench, sending him face first into the gin-clear water. Futch hasn't come this far to let someone take his 4-horsepower Alto Evinrude. On his last run, Futch broke down in the Gulf Stream, drifting north for 3 days until he fixes the motor somewhere off Miami Beach. The memory of suffering in the sun stings, and it isn't going to happen again now that he has that Alto. Pulling away from the Cardenas dock, Futch turns to see another worker jump in and pull the man out. Police would arrive soon enough. Too much is at stake. Futch is positive that justice isn't going to be on the side of an American in Cuba, especially one whose boat is loaded to the gills with liquor headed to the USA. As Futch put it, this weren't no time to be sticking around to find out if he was dead. He was quite a rounder. The last piece I'm going to read is from a chapter on tarpon fishing. "Fish on!" screams an angler as his guide guns the engine and races ahead to set the hook. A 100-pound silver tarpon zizzes 80-pound test line from a big game reel. Braided dacron thread peels out, the reel whining like a siren. Seconds later, a tarpon breaks the surface, twisting and turning, gills flaring and rattling, jumping again and again and again. The first few seconds following a tarpon's initial violent run pumps adrenaline to an angler fighting one of the great game fish. Eyes bulge, skin glows, then a gasp when his fish breaks the surface, flying 10 feet in the air. The winder grinds on the reel's handle, gaining a foot or two at a time. Then the tarpon tires and turns back to the boat, protesting all the way, zigging and zagging, shaking its head until it gives in and is off the stern, until it comes alive. Shiny as chrome, the tarpon is still green and takes off on another run. Several times, the worn-out angler gets the critter to the boat, only to watch it take off again and again and again. The captain yells, "Stop winding. You can't gain line and stop him till he stops." Sometimes a long first run forces the guide to reverse engine and back down as his angler winds furiously, the fish still taking out line, water crashing over the stern. Once the guide catches up to the fish, it's back to basics. Keep the pressure on. Keep turning the tarpon's head to the boat. Pull up, then 3 turns down on the reel as you lower the rod. Pull up, reel down. Pull up, reel down, the guide preaches, over and over and over. After a half hour of over and over, the fish is well done, and so is the angler, who earlier claims he's battled everything living in saltwater until tarpon power puts him in his place. Off the stern at last, the guide grabs the steel leader, carefully wrapping it around his gloved hand. With a quick snatch, the leader breaks at the hook's eye, releasing the fish to fight another day. The angler rolls out of his fighting chair. Winded and red-faced, he lays on the deck, wondering if he'll make it through the night, or at least to the Temptation or Pink Elephant Bar to celebrate. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. And that's only the beginning of that tale about my grandfather, Dan Futch. That goes on for 10 to 12 more pages. And indeed, in the second part of this chapter, he's involved in something that became infamous. And he got locked up in a federal lockup and got beat on for 3 days trying to get him to tell him what they had done. They finally released him, old Black and Blue, and when they did, he walked out of the federal courthouse in Tampa and he looked at my dad. My dad told me this. He looked at my dad and said, There is no justice, and there never was. And that's pretty much what you're going to get. You know, I will read off the sort of the list of chapters I have written already. I fully expect to have this book finished, or at least published, by the end of the year, and so that I can bring it back to Boca Grande and we can all fly again here safely, and bring it back to Boca Grande about this time next year. And that way you can buy one and I'll sign it for you. But here's some of the chapters that I've completed. Tarpon, a pirate in the Straits. And then the one about the marijuana smugglers of Boca Grande. It's called Square Grouper, the other prohibition. Then there's one on the other called The Other Side of the Tracks. And it tells you about how Boca Grande truly was a village, and we all took care of each other. The wealthy who lived on the beachfront, they took care of the folks that lived on Whitewash Alley, which is now Tarpon Street. The poor fishermen, they took care of us. They truly did, particularly Mrs. Crowninshield. So it's a story about the Crowninshields and Bayard Sharp and Amory's. And then I've got some funny things I've written called Futch Facts. And there are all these old crazy stories and lies that they told me about when they fished in fish camps out in Turtle and Bull Bay. And they'd be out there for a week at a time, maybe 2-3 weeks at a time, fishing. And they didn't have any entertainment. So their entertainment was to see who could come up with the biggest lie. And I've got some for you. Then the others are like a town built on phosphate. Before and after the bridge. And one of my favorites, because she was one of my favorites, favorite islanders, Charles and Jane Engelhard, barefoot on marble floors. If no one knows who Charles Engelhard was, he was the platinum king. He owned 90% of the platinum mines in the world. Then there's one about the netters. My grandfather and his eight brothers who netted millions of pounds of fish over a 100-year period or so. There's one about Hotel Hell, about how Boca Grande's historic district came to be. Of course, one on the Gasparilla Inn, sister islands, local islands, Cayo Palau and Cayo Costa. And also one about why Boca Grande is in 2 counties. That took me years to find that out. And I don't think anybody knows this. But you'll have to read about it. So thanks, everybody. And I'm so happy to see so many folks here. Thank you. And thanks, Randy.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I believe we're opening up to the open discussion point now. Thank you so much for that great insight to just the beginning of the Futchisms. We can't wait to see the finished product of this book. But now we're in the open discussion. So people, if you have questions, please put your hand up and take yourself off mute when you're called on.
We see the Bernacchios raising their hand down there.
Hello. Hey, David. It's Lou.
Hey, Lou.
Hey, quick question. By the way, I should say that my wife, Maylie, and I had the good fortune of going out tarpon fishing with David long ago when we both worked at the News Press, and that was an experience I'll never forget. A kid from Chicago out on the middle of Boca Grande Pass trying to figure out what the heck a tarpon was. But great fun, and like I said, a memory for a lifetime.
And by the way, we each caught a tarpon. Thank you, David Futch, for taking us to the right places.
We each caught a tarpon. Hey, is old Hitler in your book? And if not, do you know that story?
Oh, sure. No, he's not in the book. There were so many things that I wanted to include, but it got to a point where, I'm over 300 pages and I need to even cut some of that. There are certainly mentions of sharks in there, but old Hitler, that you talk.
Maybe that's for your next book.
There were so many big sharks in Boca Grande Pass, and so many of them that any one of them could have been old Hitler. I mean, we once caught a tiger shark off my dad's boat. It was 14 feet long.
Yeah, that's big.
That's big.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
14 feet long, that's
Good to see
pretty
you.
long.
You and me.
That was great, David.
For this year.
And there's Sonny Flatus.
How are you? That
Fine,
was
thanks.
awesome.
Thank you.
That was just awesome. And Hitler was a hammerhead. He was
Right.
really a relentless creature.
Yeah.
Here's Kathy.
There's Kathy.
Kathy, what have you got to add?
No, I don't. I didn't have anything to add.
Listen, Kathy is my brother Mark. Probably a lot of you know Mark. He was the seaplane pilot on Boca Grande, and he ran the boat Satara.
That's right.
And was one of the finest fishing guides on Boca Grande. He won the big tournament twice, the world's richest twice. He won a half a dozen or more Miller's tournaments, and I miss him. And I know Randy misses him. Randy and Mark. As a matter of fact, if you read Hunter's Moon by Randy Wayne White, there's a section about a seaplane pilot in, and it's based on Mark.
Yeah, it is.
It's called Hunter's Moon.
Much missed.
Much-
Adored. Think of him every day.
Dave, I just wanted to say that I had my one and only seaplane ride with Mark about a year before he passed, and
Yeah.
what an awesome trip that was.
He told me the two of you went over to Uzeppa to look around on one of the boats, one of the head boats that comes out of Punta Gorda.
Right.
He offered you a ride home in the seaplane. You go, wow, must be on the boat.
I was ecstatic. So much.
There's so much fun, that seaplane. So much fun. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Well, let me just say one other thing about Mark. It really almost felt like it was out of a movie, because he was actually supposed to be on the boat from Punta Gorda to the island that we were going to, but he had business and had missed it. And as we are approaching the island, this seaplane buzzes over the boat. We're trying to figure out who the heck the guy is buzzing over the boat. And it's your brother Mark, who, although he missed getting on the boat, wasn't going to miss his obligation to tell us about the island. And so he buzzed the boat, landed, gave a great speech about the island that we were on, and then we got our ride back with him. But it was a wonderful day, and he fulfilled his obligation for this tour guide, and he made it very, very special.
And I think Dumplin would like to chime in. He's at Pat's house, Pat Chapman.
Good. So, Dumpling, go ahead.
That ain't the way it happened.
I knew you'd say that.
Dumpling.
I just want to let you know that. And that picture came from Schultz over there at Cabbage Key,
Which one?
the Palaka.
Oh, the Palikia.
Yeah, whatever. And
It
tell
came from
Randy Wayne that we didn't mind him being out in the path. He was just in our way.
Lord knows that is true. I don't know.
You thought,
And Randy, Annie was my sister.
Oh, Annie, I adored Annie.
She was my sister.
She refused to tell my fortune. She wouldn't tell my fortune.
No, I'll assure you one thing. If Annie told your fortune, you wouldn't want to know it.
She told the fortune of one of my baseball buddies one day. We were up there.
Oh,
And he was
Lord.
sitting there with his wife, and he
Is
said
he
to my
still around?
baseball buddy, she said to my baseball buddy's wife, "This is your sister." And she says, "I'll tell your fortune. You're having an affair, and your husband's going to find out."
Is he still around?
He did.
And tell the couple there that if they want to know the story about old Hitler, I can tell them a bunch of stories about.
Yeah. Dumpling can, and he's got a million stories. I don't know if anybody, some of you probably know this story. what you were out, you'd taken a couple of ladies out from the Gasparilla Inn and took them over to like Bull Bay or something. Do you want to talk about that, or?
No, I don't think we want to talk that. We won't talk about that part of Boca Grande.
You have to charter Dumpling to hear that story. There's a special service for that.
And it's a hell of a story.
Yeah. But the story about old Hitler, that time I thought he bit my arm off, is the story that I usually tell about him. Is when I had some people down from North Carolina that and the man's name was Turner Bunn. They were into the tobacco business, and this is the first time they've ever been fishing in their life. And he had his whole family with him, and we got a big fish on. And back in those days, we gaffed them and brought them in and had them mounted. And he wanted to have them mounted, so I drug him all over the pass to wear him out. And of course, we picked up old Hitler along the way, and I didn't know that. And all of a sudden, my boat went to rocking and slamming and banging and framming. And old Hitler had to come on between the bottom of my boat and the keel, and he bit the tarpon from his gill plate to his rectum. And I had my hand down the tarpon's mouth trying to put a rope around there so I could tie him to the boat. And when I saw all that blood and that big mouth of Hitler's, I thought that I was scared to look because I thought he bit my arm off. And well, all those people were leaning over to the side and to see all this, and they just thought that was a big. They said, "Captain, let's go get another one. Let's go get another one." I said, "Hell no, we're going home because my boat's sinking." It knocked the plank out of the bottom of my boat, and he bent the wheel and bent the rudder. I couldn't even steer the boat.
Unbelievable.
But they thought that happened every time.
Well, how big do you think that shark was?
That shark? Well, to me, he was at least 20 foot or something, but I have no idea. I know he had a big mouth. I know that.
Yeah.
And we used to, you remember when we used to go out and harpoon him and everything else, and we never got him to the boat. In fact, my daddy made me chop the line loose one day. I got this doll from this story, but he was pulling the boat back so fast that the water was breaking over the stern, and he told me to get the knife and chop and cut the line, so I did. But he wasn't worried about the boat sinking. He was worried about the water getting in the exhaust and getting in the engine.
Yeah.
And some of your kinfolks were with me, and they didn't call Hugh Duke, they call him Nuki.
Nuki.
And they called Dwayne Rounder, you know. So was all you Futches.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. That's why they ran us off the island.
Y'all taught me some bad things.
Yeah, but did you learn anything from the Futches?
No, not at all. I learned that husbands got jealous and you better not mess with their flirt with their wives. I learned that.
Well, you learned something.
Well, anyway, I enjoyed hearing your story, and
Thanks, buddy.
I want to let Randy know that Annie was my sister. Annie was my sister. I know that I think he used to put her in his books or something, but I think I've only got to pass one of his books, The Captiva Flats or whatever it was. I loved it. I loved it. And
I adored your sister, Dumpling. I adored your sister, and your daddy was one of the funniest human beings I've ever met, and one of the toughest too.
Isn't that the truth? You want me to tell you? You want me to tell you a little story about my daddy and mama?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. About the bucket?
One time I was working with my daddy when I was a kid, and you know, when you're a kid working for your father, you can't do anything right. And so he told me, he said, I want to go home and I want my son I would not have a son like that. You can't be mine. So he went home and he started telling my mother my mama was named Doris. And he said, Doris, that stupid boy over there is not mine. I can tell you that right now. And my mama looked at him and said, now, Billy, he had just as good a chance of being yours as anybody else's. So that stopped that argument right there. And Betsy would tell you this, there was a lot of shenanigans going on down there at the Pink Elephant when my mother worked there. She would get away with a lot of stuff that I don't think most people could get away with. Like the man that reared back and lit the big cigar, and back then you could smoke in the restaurant. And my mama walked by him and took that cigar out of his mouth and stuck it in a martini and said, people are in here trying to enjoy their supper, you know.
She would. Doris was 5'0" but boy, she would not back down from anybody.
Oh God, she would.
Duncan, one of my favorite things to do though was Dave and I were talking about the jukebox the other day when we were chatting. Was watch at one point your mom and Sidney Catlett were prime dancers, jitterbugging and dancing to that jukebox, and of course your mom and daddy danced to it too, and you and Annie, and we all loved that jukebox from generation after generation. And but your mama could sure dance.
Yeah, that jukebox at the old Pink Elephant was the best jukebox I'd ever heard in my life. It had everything. The jukebox had everything from Patsy Cline to Hank Williams to Led Zeppelin to a whole cross section of.
Yeah, but David, they'd only play 2 songs. They'd play
Harbor Lights.
Harbor Lights and
Salty Dog
Rag.
Salty Dog Rag.
I used to dance to the Salty Dog Rag on Sunday nights in the bar when the bar was closed. And I could stay upstairs and I'd put that Salty Dog Rag on over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think you and I
After I picked up Mark Futch hitchhiking, we went to the Pink Elephant and we danced to that jukebox. That was
first date.
1975. First date. Yeah, we danced to The Entertainer, I think it was, of Billy Joel.
We had some good times, Mark and David and Kathy and I bartending upstairs at the Pink Elephant together, and we used to all dance and make those Bloody Marys and those daiquiris from fresh lime juice. And
I've got
after the hours, lock the doors and dance and dance and dance.
Two of the recipes in the book are one's the Bloody Mary recipe and the other one's the old añejo rum recipe, the La Floridita one. But what was that one that we used to make it? No, I guess that was it. Yeah, añejo, a lot of añejo and Coke went across that bar.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And they made Pink Elephant had the best Bloody Marys ever because they made it with the key lime, you know.
Key lime, made with key lime.
Yeah, and Worcestershire sauce and all that. Yeah. Oh yeah. And you gotta get Sam Whidden in there somewhere.
Oh, he's in there. He's in there for sure.
And Albert Paget.
Albert Paget is in there, the Hermit of Turtle Bay. Here, let me
What about Peanuts and Whiskers?
Peanuts is in there. He's in I write one chapter, it's called Watering Holes. It's about the Pink Elephant, the Temptation, the Laugh-A-Lot, and the Albatross.
Oh Lord, yeah.
Yeah, the Albatross.
That's what I found that. Yeah, you can tell that. You remember that story I told you about that?
I did, and that's what's in there. But don't tell them that story. I want them to read it.
Okay.
It's so good. It actually ends.
And that is a true story.
And it ends the chapter. But I want to show y'all something. This was, I think you can see it. This was
Albert Paget.
Beardsley's. That's Albert Paget's shack in Bull Bay.
That was his house.
he stayed there for years. They used to drink moonshine over there, make moonshine and stuff. Now that's the shack, but I want to show you the idyllic picture that my mother painted. Looks a little different.
And Albert Paget, you remember David had that at his table, he had his table leg sitting in a coffee cans full of water so the roaches wouldn't crawl up the leg.
So the roaches wouldn't crawl up the leg.
Yeah, and then when you go in there and he'd offer you a cup of coffee, that coffee was thick as mud, and he'd just take and dump the old coffee out of the cup and on the table and pour you some new coffee in there.
We were down there one time. Me and Dad went over there to see him, and we had a couple of girls with us, and so we pulled into Albert's dock, and he was up in the house, and Dad yelled at him and said, "Albert, okay if we go swimming off your dock?" And he goes, "I don't give a damn what you do." And so the two girls took all their clothes off. The next thing
I was there.
The next thing we see is Albert Paget come running down the dock, jumping in the water.
Yeah, no, that ain't how it happened, David. That ain't how it happened. What happened was he had that big black hat on, and he had his under clothes on, white underclothes, and he was squatting on the dock. And those two girls were down in the cabin of the boat, and we started, horsing around and pushing each other overboard. And he said, "Boys, don't y'all push me overboard, because the doctor told me I got a big hole in my heart, and if I get one drop of water on me, I'm a dead man." So we said, "Okay, we won't do that." No. So
why was he dead?
By that time,
he had a big hole in his heart.
By that time, those two girls came out of the cabin of the boat, buck naked, and they jumped overboard, and all I saw was that black hat flying through the air. He forgot all about that hole in his heart.
Hole in his heart. Didn't kill him though, did it?
But he was the kind of person that would. He just didn't tell you one lie. He'd back it up with another one. That time he told me that he was up in Tennessee, and he walked out on the porch to take a leak. And he looked over there on the side of the mountain. There was a deer standing over there, and he said, "Dumpling, he was so far away that I had to climb up on the roof of my house." And he said, "I shot that deer. And when I went over to get him, it was 7 miles over there." I said, "My God." And he said, "You know what? I didn't even see that other deer standing beside him."
7 miles, the greatest shot ever taken.
And his favorite word when he'd say something like that, he'd always say, "Now, what about that?"
What?
Well,
where am
I
I
got
at?
one for you.
What about that?
This is what Mark told me. He said he went over there one time. You know how all those guys, there's a bunch of guys that used to live back in them Palmettos, Cape Hayes, and they would come there on Saturday night and get all drunked up on moonshine and stuff with Albert. And the thing about it was they took turns wearing a dress and dancing with each other while they got all drunk.
Yeah, I got a thousand stories I could tell you about Albert Paget. He was a character now.
Well, I'll be calling you for some. That's funny
that
stuff.
time that Willie Stoller shot him off the bow of his boat, that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard of. Because, Willie, he used to stop net over there, and he lived on that lighter, and Albert was going fishing, and I can't remember his wife's name. Can you? But anyway, she snuck over there to the lighter. When Albert came back, he couldn't find her, so he had that little boat he called Dinky, and it had the tiller lines on it, and he was standing on the bow and pulling on those tiller lines, and when he got close to that lighter, Wilbur started, Willie Starr, shot that shotgun in the air. And he pulled on one of those tiller lines so hard it broke and threw him overboard, and the boat went off and left him.
Well, didn't he one time, he said that, he goes, a big blow came up, and the fishing hadn't been so good, but this blow came up, and then all of these, I was surrounded by sheep's head, but I would run out of bait. So I threw a bunch of sour grape vines into the water, and every one of them fish bit on that sour grape. I pulled them in and went to the fish house and sold them.
Yeah, and he told me that he caught that boat wouldn't hold 10 pounds of fish, that dinky.
I was going to say 20.
And I told him about catching some mullet one day, and he told me, he said, that ain't nothing, Dumpling. I was over there at Costa one day. And he said, I struck and I caught 5,000 pounds of sheephead. I said, my God. And he said, it was blowing a screaming nor'wester. And I said, how'd you get back across the pass with that 5,000 pounds of fish on your boat? And he said, well, I was going across there. And he said, you're not going to believe this, but as soon as I got in front of the big dock, he said, my propeller fell off. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, what did you do about it? He said, I dove overboard and got it and put it back home.
In Boca Grande Pass.
Yeah, Boca Grande Pass. I used to stop by every night when I went mullet fishing and stop to see if he needed anything and say hello to him. And my God, the stories that I heard in there that you could believe. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading your book. What does that say?
Oh yeah, Dump. I can't wait for it, man. And you know what? A lot of those stories that you just told, or some of those stories you just told, they're in I wrote 2 chapters called Futch Facts. And you know what a Futch fact is, don't you? Now these 2 chapters are about all these lies that they used to tell each other in the fish camps.
Oh yeah.
Again, they didn't have any other entertainment. I mean, there are ones like Dick Cooper said he invented the jet engine. He went on for 3 hours one night talking about how he had invented the jet engine. Somebody said, well, how does it work, Dick? He goes, I don't know. Yeah. I've got like 2 dozen stories.
I want to tell you another story about Albert Paget.
Go ahead.
Remember that time that he bought that Brigham Tractor motor and put in Dinky? It was about, it was about a 10 horsepower.
One longer. It was a one longer, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was about a 10 horsepower motor, and he was coming across the Boca Grande. Finally, he unbolted it and threw it overboard and said, if you ain't going to run, you ain't going to ride.
Oh,
he was something else.
He was something else. When he went out in the...
But back when I was growing up, there was a lot of people that on this island that were funny, and they didn't mean to be funny. They were serious, and it just tickled me like Fellow Padilla and Albert Andrew. Remember the Zip Man, Andrew Padilla? He used to zip you with his tongue. With his thumb.
I don't remember him.
You don't remember that?
Was that Phelan's son or his brother?
I'm telling you, when he stuck that thumb in your stomach, it hurt.
Yeah.
So
was that Esperanza Woodring's daddy, Dumpling?
I'm sorry?
Was that Esperanza Woodring's father, Padilla?
He was part of the Padilla family. I know he was Phelan's brother, and they were all came from the Trevius over there, and the Padillas and the Hamiltons and the Colemans and the Joiners and that were all mixed up together there. So
the Padillas they fished off of Kai Costa with the Darnas too, didn't he?
Yeah, they was all That was all one big group over there. But old man Trevius he's the one that had the fish camp. I mean, the fish ranch over there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you I can't tell you on this thing, but I'll tell you one day about Grandma Sophie and all of those people.
Well, the feds came after him and back in the early 1900s or something. And when they got there, they were going to kick him off Cayo Costa because they were going to make Cayo Costa a federal outpost, I guess. It was like after the war or something, after a civil war or something. And so they got to the encampment and there wasn't anybody there. Fires were still burning and stuff. And they had hauled buggy. And when the feds left, they just went back. That's all they did.
Yeah, I used to spend my summers over in Cayo Costa, so
were the mosquitoes bad on Cayo Costa, Dumpling?
Oh no, not at all. No. And that boat goat would knock me off the dock every time I was trying to take groceries to the house. He'd ram me, and back then they didn't have paper bags. Plastic bags. They had those paper bags, and the groceries would go everywhere in the water.
Well, my granddaddy Dan said that the mosquitoes are so big on Cayo Costa they can make love to a turkey flat.
Oh, you got it, yeah, and there was a lot of them too. I'm telling you what, you didn't walk anywhere, you ran.
You ran. That's a fact. You ran from that dock out to the beach, hoping there was a breeze out there.
You got that right. I don't know. There was and then the schoolhouse over there in Punta Blanca was where the school boat had to go pick up all those kids and take them to the schoolhouse every morning.
Yeah.
And then when they closed the schoolhouse down, they brought them over here to Boca Grande. And that didn't go over very well for a long time.
Why? Because they were foreigners?
Huh?
Why? Because they were foreigners all the way down on Cayo Costa?
Not so much of that. They were all, those boys were.
They're what?
Those boys were,
hellraisers.
They've been on Cayo Costa a long time. The girls' parents didn't want them to mess around with those boys from Cayo Costa. That's what Puny told me that time when he said.
Puny Hamilton, is that who that was?
Puny, he used to work with me down at the fish house. And,
yeah, that's right.
And Ponzo come in and wanted to know, asked Puny, said, Puny, have you seen my boys? And he said, you mean them Spaniards from Cayo Costa? They had romance in their eyes and gold in their pocket.
Oh, those stories are so good, Dumpling. So good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Anybody else got something to say, or you want to let Dumpling keep talking?
No, that's all right. You can say.
We're enjoying you talking, Dumpling.
I think that's a whole nother book coming out.
I think so. My Dumpling Wheeler.
Yeah. That ain't the way it happened. That's what
I told you to say that.
Y'all can color that picture any way you want to, but it's still blue.
Oh, too good. Too good. Jeez. You know, I don't know if y'all know this about Dumpling's daddy, Billy Wheeler. He was a heck of a man. I mean, he was a man's man. He had fists like this.
And I know about
like
that.
This. He used
I know about that.
He would sleep on the beach when he first got to Boca Grande. He would sleep on the beach at the south end, and he and one of the Johnsons,
J.D. Johnson.
J.D. Johnson. He and J.D. Johnson would pull up Jewfish that weighed 300-400 pounds by hand. Pull them up with a line, because they just get a big line and put a shark hook on it with whatever they had, like a grouper or something. When that Jewfish hit, they'd pull that thing up on the dock. And then on the weekends, he would jump on the freight train headed to Tampa and would bare knuckle fist fight and his record was 73-1. He won 73 out of 74 bare knuckle fist fights. Did that to make money. That's how bad it was in the Depression.
Yeah, he, you know what happened was when he was first got here, they had built that old house for the crew that built the lighthouse, and they had abandoned it and left it on the beach, and he moved in there, and then he went and fished off the dock, the big dock, to feed himself, and those ships would come in and see him with a big old Jewfish, and he and J.D. Johnson, and they'd buy the fish from him because they wanted fresh fish on those ships and everything, and so that's how he got started, all that. So he was hoboing around during the Depression. He was just a young kid, and he jumped on a freight train in Tampa, and this is where it landed in Boca Grande. That's how we got here.
I'll be darned.
And that's how he met my mama, and she was kin to, no, I'm not going to tell that.
Yeah, I wanted to say that. He won't admit that. I
think that's one of those.
Give it up, Dublin.
I don't believe that's a true story. I think
that's a true story. Okay, Albert Paget.
So, but he didn't cut, you know, poor, remember Aunt Rose? He used to shock her to death. Remember Aunt Rose that was married to Uncle Lonnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad, you know, she would sit down there on that dock, and she was one of those high-strung Methodist people. My daddy would shock her to death just for the meanness of it, you know? And he'd be cussing the Futches. And Aunt Rose, you know, she said, "Billy, you can't cuss those Futches like that." He said, "The hell I can't, I'm married to one of them."
Yeah, but you know that, and then I tell you, your dad, Billy Wheeler, could cook the best fish chowder of any human being alive. And what they used to do at the old Pink Dock, there used to, the dock across from the Pink Elephant, it was longer. It had like, what, about 30 slips in it? I'd say
32 slips. 32
slips. And, you know, everybody was working all the time. So Billy always made a big, like 20-gallon pot of grouper chowder, and it was always on the dock. And you could always get you something to eat. There was always something there, and that recipe is in the book.
I think that had a lot to do with the Pink Elephant opening the restaurant, because when everybody found out that my daddy was cooking that chowder on the dock, they'd all leave the bar rooms and come over there and get him some.
And then you know what? Delmer Fugate, who had the Pink, he told Billy, "You come over to my place and cook barbecue and make that chowder so we can sell it to people."
And but the bad part about that was he used to make scallops and oysters and that Martinese stew with the swamp cabbage, and I'd have to cut the cabbage, and I'd have to go up and go out to Bull Bay and get the scallops, and then I'd have to go get the oysters and. Yeah. And then when he built that smokehouse and smoked mullet, and then he'd go get drunk, and then he'd put me in charge of the smokehouse, and of course it'd always burn down.
It burned down.
Yeah, he had those homemade smokers. You know, he built his with the wire racks and everything on it. He built his own.
Yeah.
And,
well, I wonder, does anybody else have anything they want to say? Or, I mean, we've sort of monopolized this conversation here. No?
David, I'm going to sign off. I want to thank you. I so enjoyed listening to you and Dumplin and seeing Kathy again. And it's been a delight. And good luck in your book. Look forward to seeing you. We need to catch up, buddy.
Okay, man. I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Love you.
Love you, baby.
Yeah, thank you, Randy.
Miss Hubbard, I guess.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. Do you have anything else you want to say, though, Patsy? I mean, any questions or anything?
No, I'm just enjoying it all. And I was on the other day too, and I've just enjoyed it all.
But I want to tell you one thing that I used to love to dance with Betsy because she was a good dancer.
Well, she had a lot of practice. She'd been in that pink elephant since she was about 2 years old.
All right, I'm through.
All right, Dumpling. Thank you,
Thank
man.
you, Dumpling. Thank you, Pat, for bringing Dumpling on for you.
Yeah, you beat
Oh,
the
and
show.
not on that, I got lobster for lunch or whatever.
Well, there you go. Bribery. Still haven't bribed you with food. Well, does anyone else have any more questions? If not, we're going to probably start to wrap this up, but we've got lines are still open if you have questions.
You got a question?
Nope. I'm with the real authority right here.
Yeah, that's the real authority right there.
But I'm looking forward to reading your book too.
Well, thank you.
But I want you to sign my book.
Oh, I'll sign the book, Dumpling.
And I want it. I want it free. I don't want it to have to pay for it.
I'll give it to you free, but you've got to read every word and say, that's the truth. That's the gospel.
Let me tell you something. I learned a long time ago, the Futches give you something, be aware.
Why? Because it's either broke or they don't need it, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Boca Grande Historical Society is really going to be happy to next year, hopefully in January, when David's book is published, to host David right here. And he'll be here in person, and we'll have the books, and we'll be more than happy to we'll let everyone know, obviously, way ahead of time. So, David, we're real thankful for your participation and for Randy coming on board with us and everybody that's been here today.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, Betsy.
And thank you, everybody. Now, we're going to mark your calendars for the next oral history of Gasparilla Island's Black community, featuring Kaylee Stokes. Kaylee Stokes will be here on February the 9th by Zoom at 2 p.m. So hopefully everyone will be on board for that. Again, Kaylee did a research project and actually spoke to a lot of the Black community that she was able to reach. She was a student at New College in Sarasota, so this should be extremely interesting. And Jim Blaha has worked very closely with her. He and Rosemarie here at the History Center, and they actually have a book put together with a lot of the things Kaylee's got, and Kaylee's going to donate it all to the Historical Society for everyone to see. Thank you all the members for making this possible, and please remember, if you're not already a member of the Society, please join. The membership allows you to continue providing these events, as well as our daily mission at the History Center, bringing history to life by collecting, documenting, and archiving island history and sharing it with our community. Remember, the History Center is accessible for research questions, to book purchases of books by phone or email. Its exhibits are open by appointment. Please call or email in advance. Mask and social distancing guidelines are being observed. You can also visit the History Center virtually via our website at BocaGrandeHistoricalSociety.com. Membership may be purchased at www.BocaGrandeHistoricalSociety.com or call 964-1600. We thank you, each and every one of you from the Society, and we thank you so much for attending today.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Lou and Maylee.
David?
Bye, Dave. Bye.
Hang in there, buddy.
We'll talk soon.